All right, in this video, we're going to be looking at characteristics of modern amphibians. They have a bony skeleton. This is what you'd expect, right? There's no cartilaginous skeletons anymore. We left those off with the sharks. They have a varying number of vertebrae, so the vertebra is not specific. Ribs are present in some. You can see here on this frog skeleton that it does have ribs, but they're not very substantial, so they don't have a whole lot of function of the muscle attachment. So bony skeleton. Lots of different body forms present in amphibians. You have a frog, which is more of a jumping kind of form. You have the salamander, which is kind of your prototypical tetrapod, four-legged thing with a tail. You have this over here, the caecilian, which is a vertebrate, but it looks like a worm. It's not a worm, it's a vertebrate. It's an amphibian. It's a legless amphibian. Yeah, and then there's some dead thing up there, probably the ancestral amphibian. Limbs are typically quadrupedal, meaning that they have four limbs, two pairs, a shoulder and a girdle, and a hip girdle. And then some forms have just two pair of limbs. Some salamanders, for instance, will only have two pairs of limbs and not have legs. And some of them will be legless, like the caecilians, and some have no limbs at all, like the caecilians. They don't have nails, so they don't have claws like a reptile does. Forelimbs usually have 4 digits and sometimes 5, sometimes fewer than that, but typically you have the digits there as well. The heart has a couple of things going on. Heart has something called a sinus venosus. It has 2 atria and a single ventricle. So they have a 3-chambered heart. Sinus venosus is kind of the collection point of the blood until it's pumped out to the rest of the body. Has a double circulation. Goes one circuit goes out to the lungs, and the other circuit goes out to the rest of the body. This allows for some prevention of the mixing of blood, but it's still a 3-chambered heart is not perfect at this because the ventricle is where some mixing is going to occur. Their skin is smooth and glandular, so no scales or anything on amphibians. Some amphibians actually do retain their scales, so that this makes them be more like fish, not like reptiles. And so they have glandular skin as well. These glands are typically associated with the secretion of defensive compounds like poisons or some sort of other deterrent for prey or predators. They also have pigments in their skins, which gives them a variety of different colors, and sometimes those colors are associated with predatory defense as well. Here you can see the poison glands, mucus glands. Difference between poison and venom, just real quick. Venom is something that's injected into the bloodstream, usually via some sort of device like a claw or tooth, and then a poison gland is something that is ingested and causes pain from within the digestive system. Respiration happens through the skin, also happens through the lungs, and in some amphibians, they retain their gills. Some have all three. And so this depends on the developmental stage of the species, and some will actually retain those juvenile characteristics through their adulthood. And so, and then a lot of amphibians go through a metamorphosis where they kind of lose their gills and lose those larval forms and retain lungs and lose their tail and such forth as they become adults. They are ectothermic, means that they have to regulate body temperature depending or using their behavior, using the environment. So they if they're cold, they have to get to a warm place. If they're hot, they have to get to a cold place, so forth. They are the same temperature as the environment. It's a great picture because it shows the environment being purple. It shows the little guy being purple. If he sat there on that person's hand long enough, he would start to become orange. The person's hand is regulated from within, endothermic, and so it's orange. It's independent of the temperature of the environment. Real quick, excretory system, paired kidneys. Urea is the main nitrogenous waste. Some of them actually convert that urea into urine. Their ears, they have a tympanic membrane, which is what we call an eardrum. And then they also have this stapes, which is a very similar organ to what we have, this little bone that transmits vibrations to the inner ear, which transmits it as the brain picks up and perceives as sound, which is pretty interesting. Vision. For a lot of them, they have this kind of this external lens, and it and a cornea, very similar to our own eyes, which allows light to be refracted and bent. So it allows that for focusing of the image. They have multiple eyelids so that they can see below the surface of the water, kind of like permanent goggles, which is pretty cool. And for their mouth is usually large with small teeth, and the teeth serve the purpose of holding the prey in rather than like chewing or anything like that. They have paired nostrils or nares, which allow them to eat and breathe at the same time, again, which is a function that has to be present for terrestrial species to live on land. And they also practice external fertilization. So, separate sexes, external fertilization means that what you see here in this picture is the male is actually squeezing the eggs out of the female, and then he will fertilize them outside of the body. They're predominantly oviparous, but some of them are ovoviviparous or viviparous. Metamorphosis is usually present in all species, and so that's how they're able to again go from the larval form in the water and then later into the adult form on land.